Don't wait, Solomon. Let's go. Don't wait. Don't wait. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Not to denigrate Martinez. Right hand and down goes Julio. Because Martinez is certainly used to being on the back of his lap from time to time.
Now it's Arthur Johnson's turn. Oh, and a little bolo punch.
I got a former Olympian, Mr. Arthur Flash Johnson. I do appreciate you for coming on and having a conversation with me today, man.
All right. Hey, no problem. No problem. It's my pleasure, man. And I look forward to interesting conversations. That really that makes for just interesting whatever.
Yes,
That's
yes, sir.
that's always welcome.
So, for people who might not know, like I said earlier, you're a former Olympian in the sport of boxing. So I guess we kind of want to start off. What I want to kind of know is like, how did you get into boxing, and then was there like somebody who introduced it to you, or how did you kind of find your way into combat sports?
Well, I would like to think as a kid growing up, it was kind of like one of those things that that was in me, if you will, if I can put it that way. I think we're all born with a little something, in us, and it's kind of up to us how we pursue it or go about pursuing it. And for me, it was boxing. This kind of one of the things that I kind of imagined myself doing as a young kid growing up in the city of East St. Louis. And I would, as a kid, just kind of shadow box and kind of imitate the fact that I'm in a competition with someone. So that was just kind of something I think that was kind of a born given thing, if you will. And from there, I basically got involved whenever there was boxing going on within the community. Even though I didn't know very much about it, I would definitely snoop my nose in there to see what's going on. And I can recall probably my first interest or my first, I guess, my first, I guess, I wouldn't call it a competition. I would call it involvement, if you will. Was sparring with the kid who had been boxing before, and I kind of saw some kids out there kind of messing around, and there was a next door neighbor. His name was Cody. We all called him Cody. He went by Cody in the neighborhood, and Cody was out there, and so I went out there to just kind of get involved. And as I got involved, there was a kid out there that had been boxing before. He didn't have a whole lot of experience, but he had more experience than I did. And so my first encounter was this kid, and I sparred a little bit. And what I remember most importantly was being knocked on my tush, and just kind of welcoming the fact of this whole boxing deal. And how I really got involved after that several years later was a couple of guys, one by the name of James Hooks, and another one was called, his name was Benjamin Stiff. And these were a couple of young guys who had boxed and competed in Golden Gloves and things of that nature, and they wanted to start a boxing club in the projects. And so that's primarily where I grew up, even though my first encounter was in another neighborhood. My second encounter was the encounter that actually led me into boxing. Yeah. So and these two guys came out and they wanted to start a boxing program, and so they did. It was a bunch of us kids running around there with not a whole lot to do, but they found something for us to do, and that was to, get into boxing, because the whole idea for them was to, if we can get these kids to see that they can travel the world and they can do some amazing things,
Right.
At this, if we can sell this idea to them, we might be able to pull a kid out of here that will go all the way. That was their thought in it, and it did work.
Nice. So I'm kind of I've only been watching boxing for about like 3-4 years now, so I still got a lot of learning to do. But was there like a certain boxer or boxers that kind of turned the knob up for you a little bit more that made you want to box more, or was it simply because you were around a lot of kids sparring?
Well, Ali
Okay.
was everybody's go-to for as far as being a hero in the sport. And so, if you watched Ali, you saw Ali, um, what he did for boxing, and he was a great humanitarian outside of that. But and what would be really funny about this Ali deal, okay, was drew me because I liked Ali, and I can remember guys like Larry Holmes and so forth and so on. But Ali was the one that captured the world, if you will. He changed the world of boxing. And again, what would be so funny about that is years later, I would be in the same family as Ali was, boxing family, which was Angelo Dundee, who trained him and then managed him, and also trained and managed me in my career. So, wow, I mean, who would have known?
Yeah,
So
that's actually
that,
pretty
that
crazy.
kind of okay. Say it again.
I said, yeah, that's pretty crazy considering the fact
Yeah,
that what you're looking up to, especially the mogul that Muhammad Ali was, and like he was the face of boxing, and kind of a time in life where people like him, as far as someone who was outspoken and of color, there weren't really too many people before him doing what he was doing. So for him to be the first one, and you guys tying and being in the same family, that is pretty cool. Um,
yeah.
so later down the line, you actually represent USA in the Olympics in boxing. Could you walk me through as far as like how did you get the opportunity to compete for Team USA, and how was that as far as any hurdles or anything you had during that time?
Oh, there was certainly hurdles. You had to be special to make the Olympic team back in the day that that I made it, which was in the 80s, 88 to be exact. And it goes down as one of the most popular teams in all of the Olympics in the history of boxing in USA. So you had to be able to definitely um, control things inside of the ring, inside of the four squared circle. For me, it was winning national competitions. And so that's how you really get looked at for something like that, because you actually have to go through nationals and, of course, the Olympic trials. And it's such a long story. It's such a long road there. But for me, I set records. I set a record as the flyweight champion. And it was a record that it was 99 years in the making. I did the research on it myself one day, and it was 99 years in the making. Nobody had ever did it as a flyweight. And so I captured three national titles. And to this day, we're talking three consecutive. So anybody can do three nationals, right? But
Right.
it's three consecutive. So years later, the record still stands. It's been tied a couple of times, but I always like to say it's been tied, not broken. So that's not the same as setting it. So it's wonderful to see something like that that still stands to this day, even though I'm kind of looking at it from the outside. I can remember setting that record, and a number of other records, but that was one that was for the keeping, and it still stands today, and it hasn't been moved uh, as I know yet, and I captured it some 30 something years ago. So
Right.
yeah, so in
So,
any event,
so you
that
said
was
oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, I'm sorry. So that was the road. That was the road to getting to the Olympics, catching, getting the national titles and becoming one of the respectable forces in the sport at that time.
So how long were you, winning belts and things like that? Like how long was it until they started noticing you, and you kind of started getting the buzz as far as you were getting the idea that you probably had a shot to represent USA.
Well, Perhaps in the 84, in 84, I competed in the Olympic trials and I lost in like the quarterfinals. And so for the next 4 years, I think most of the guys in that 84 pack went pro. So you had young guys like me who competed in the 84 Olympic trials that was going to stay around because I was young at that time. I was, what was I? Somewhere between 18, 17, somewhere in there. And so what they were looking at that point, the rebuilding of the next Olympic team. And so I would stay around for 4 years and virtually became almost impossible to beat during that time. I can remember going 3 years and a couple months without losing to a single American boxer. So I was the guy that they was going to be looking at, and so that was and not only me, but there were a few others that were in higher weight classes that were able to accomplish that. But for the main part, for me, is the fact that I did it in such a dominating factor.
Right. So you mentioned, you went 3 years undefeated against American fighters. When you get to the Olympics, was there like I know there's a different style and, foreign fighters, but how hard was it for you to like adjust from, getting used to fighting American fighters to now you're in the Olympics and you're fighting foreign fighters? How was that hard to adjust for you?
Well, in between all that time, I had international bouts.
Okay.
So I would compete against Cuba, I compete against Russia. I competed all the way through that time from 84 to, like, we'll say from 84 to 88, I was competing internationally. So I had a pretty good stance internationally. I had won the sort of like the Junior World Challenge competition. So that was, then I had won the Goodwill Games, which was the first Goodwill Games in 1986. It was a competition that was used to, really reunite Russia and America again. And so, as we can see to this day, I don't know if Russia and America is really united after all those years. But anyway, that tournament, I became the first American boxer, actually the first non-Soviet to win gold in the inaugural Goodwill Games, and was also chosen the outstanding boxer. So I had a lot of international competition. So I was used to the international deal when it came to style and things of that nature, because you had to make adjustments. It was really not like it is today, where they can kind of look at tape and all that kind of stuff. You had to make adjustments on the spot, man. So you had to make adjustments on the spot to deal with those guys. And so that was the gift that I believe God, gave me from the get-go, to be able to make adjustments, think quickly, and just all of those things that involve, time and reflexes, and that have to go into being successful against these folks internationally.
Right. So like you are in a certain weight class when you are boxing, but we know that some boxers can be bigger than others and smaller than others. Were you more comfortable fighting fighters that were bigger than you, smaller than you, or were you kind of in the same headspace no matter who you were going up against?
Well, when you compete nationally and internationally, first of all, you guys got to say weigh the same amount. So for me, it would have been like 51 kilos. So in pounds, that's 112 pounds. So I was comfortable with that. So I mean, one of the things that I think that one would have to make an adjustment with would be the height. So sometimes you'd have a short, studied guy who's a little bit, under the chin, so to speak. He's the kind of guy that's going to come forward. He knows he's got to come forward to force the fight. Or you could have a guy who's just as tall as you, which would make it more of a challenge, because we're going to see now who's going to be able to use their reach and their athletic abilities. So I probably I would say that the shorter guys probably brought on a more challenge for me, because they had to come forward. They had to really come get it. So I had to really be up for that and really just be ready to go to work every single second and minute that I was in the ring with them. And so the taller guys, it just kind of depends on the fighter. You could get a tall guy that could really, bring on a hard challenge as well, just the same as a short guy. But I think that for me, it was probably the shorter guys who probably gave more of a effort, and because they were just gonna be right there. They know they had to come forward. They know they couldn't, outbox me,
Right.
and so they had to be more of a fighter.
Right. So throughout your Olympic days, what were some things that you would have to do to prepare for a fight? I know some people, they've got to be listening to music all day. Some people like to be left alone. What were things that you did that made you, kind of like comfortable enough for when it's fight, you were kind of locked in? What did you do to, get you locked in?
Man, I just kind of got in my zone, if you will. I always tried to get in the zone kind of before bouts and just kind of imagine to myself, visualize those sort of things, even in resting, kind of visualize the moment and look at what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And so I think that was the whole idea for me, was getting in my own space. For some folks, like you just mentioned, there's a few other things they might want to do, maybe being around people. For me, it was just like, getting into my own world and really kind of psyching myself up, if you will, if that's what you want to call it now, pumping myself up. So pumping myself up if I needed to. But just kind of visualizing the whole idea of how I wanted this thing to go down, how I wanted, and imagine how I wanted it to end.
Right. So this next question, I mean, this answer could be different depending on who I'm asking. But like as a fighter, what were kind of the things that you had a problem with or you struggled to kind of learn? I know some fighters, they have trouble staying composed. Some have a problem with, I guess being patient and composed go hand in hand. But was there like something that you had to like key in and work on in order for you to take that next step?
I think with every fighter, there are things that they definitely want to work on to be better at. And so I would say for myself, most people wouldn't know this, but I really just worked on the jab aspect, my jab, and my coach would say, and to this day, probably one of the best jabs in boxing, because I worked on it over and over and over and over and over. And once I got a broken hand, my right hand was broke. I really had to work on it because it was the only hand that I had. So I really, really executed that thing and really felt comfortable when I stepped in the ring and used it. You were going to have to be some kind of special to overcome it. So I probably, for me, one of the things that I think I worked on more than anything was probably perhaps my jab, my left jab, and it carried me on into the pros because I worked on it so well in the amateurs.
Gotcha. So when the Olympics are over, that's when you go to the pros. Is that correct? Like you can't take
Exactly.
a pro in the Olympics. Is that correct?
It's different. It's different now.
Okay,
It's different now. You can do it now.
you can do it
So
now.
I don't know if I really want to call those guys Olympians.
Okay, gotcha. So
It's not fair. It's not fair to the other guy. But hey, whatever. I mean, the game has changed. The game has changed. So this year, because you kind of brought up an interesting, conversation. So I'm kind of chiming in on it.
yes, sir.
So I'm like, I'm looking at it like, these guys can, fight 9 to 10 pro bouts and then they can go into the Olympics.
Right.
What's right about that? It wasn't, and for me, I mean, we were young kids fighting guys who were already pros in the foreign countries because
Right.
they're pros in the foreign countries. And so they just thought to make, I wish they would have thought it for me.
Yes, sir.
So I wish they would have thought of that idea for me.
Yeah, because to my knowledge, I was thinking because I was watching a video about a year or two ago, and the boxer was explaining how the reason he didn't go pro so early was because since he was a little kid, he dreamed of representing having that USA across his chest. So I was kind of confused. But it makes sense now. You can't be a pro in the Olympics, but I know in other sports you can. So that's kind of where it was throwing me off, like basketball and things like that. You can
Yeah.
get pro and still represent your country. So
Right.
that's what's kind of throwing me off. But what was the biggest difference from, jumping from the Olympics to, jumping to your professional career? Was everything kind of
Well,
the same or?
yeah, well, back in the day for me, I actually did something that I don't think any fighter ever did.
Mhm.
And when I say this, you got to kind of follow what I'm saying.
Sure.
I actually retired after the Olympics. I actually retired, and I was retired for 4 years. Now, you could say Ali did it, Ray Leonard did it, a few other fighters did it, yada, yada, yada. But here's the deal. It's different because they were already in their pro careers. I had no pro career
Right.
at that time that I retired. So from what I see from all perspectives, I'm kind of the first guy that did that I know of, that came out of retirement, that retired after the Olympics. So that would have meant 88 I retired, 92 I came back, and then I came back and won championships and things of that nature. So that's kind of a different deal. And no matter how they chop it up, I know those guys retired. They were already into their pro careers. You know, they retired while they were in their careers, and then they came back and then won titles and first one things and the other. But for me, it was retiring after the Olympics, and then I came back, and that's what really gave me the attention. And when the name became known and all that kind of stuff, here I'm doing something that hadn't been done. That I retired immediately after the Olympics. Like I didn't cash in. I didn't cash in for my career, my past career, from the amateur career, from the Olympics status. I didn't cash in. But at the time, when I did decide to go pro, thank God, there was an investment made in me to move forward when I decided to, which was 4 years later. But I can't think of a fighter that ever done that. Now, you'll probably hear people say, "Oh, yeah, I could think of," but I I don't think it was done, period. So, because you always have people that say, you know what, I think this guy did it. No, I don't think so. Because I definitely was looking for people who had did that. And the closest person that I came to that had did that was Ali, and the fact that he had to retire because he refused to go into service and all of those things. And then you had Ray Leonard because he had a bum eye, but then he came back, first one thing and the other. But those weren't the same. They were already into their careers. I wasn't into my career. I was just coming from the amateurs.
Right.
So
was there a
yeah.
reason for the retirement after the Olympics? Like, were you kind of done with boxing, or?
One thing I would say more like it was a spiritual, um, uh, a spiritual thing. If I can put it that way. I wrote about it in my book, and it would definitely come out once the story itself, the film that we're gonna do about it.
Okay.
But it was a spiritual thing, more like I also had a hurt hand that had been plaguing me for a number of years, and that needed rest too. But so it kind of worked out. It worked out. I didn't necessarily want to retire for 4 years, but who does that? So who does that? Arthur Johnson does that. So when I came back, it was a lot of people noted it that I had been out of boxing for 4 years, and came back in at the level, because usually when you're off that long, you don't come back successfully, because you lose a lot, especially when you got a lot in your favor. You lose a lot.
Yes, sir.
But I was able to overcome that.
That makes sense. So when you retired, did you kind of know that, once everything got back to how it was supposed to be, that you wanted to go back to boxing, or at that moment was boxing kind of in the rearview for you?
Boxing was always there. Even though I wasn't doing it, it was always there. It was always at the back of my mind. And I always knew that, time is ticking. And I would meet people, on the street. At the time I was living in Minneapolis. So I would meet people on the street, and they say, "Oh, you that guy?" Oh, and then they would look and they were like, you know how sometimes people look and say, "I know that guy, right?" No, but are you, are you the one? Yeah. So people kind of looked at me in that way, and it just kind of took it took a minute for me. Boxing was always there, was always in the in the review, and I would also think in terms of the clock is ticking. When would I come back? And so it took me having to have a made up mind, because you cannot go into that sport playing it. You can play baseball, you can play basketball, you can play hockey, but you cannot play boxing.
Right.
Or you get hurt permanently. So so that was the thing there for me, was having a made up mind, and just having, because my wife was with me she's with me all the way, whatever I wanted to do. And really, we I kind of struggled being off as long as I was off, but when I came back, um, I knew I had to come with everything, and so that's what I did.
That's good. So, throughout your boxing career, your professional boxing career, well, now you have a gym, a boxing gym. Is that something throughout your professional career that eventually you wanted to have, or how did the idea come about as far as you starting your own gym?
I knew that I wanted to do the Arthur Johnson Foundation probably when I was a kid. Isn't that amazing? I knew I wanted to do that. I knew I wanted to give back to the community. I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to enlighten the next generation and things of that nature, that I wanted to give back in that way. I just didn't know that it was going to take the shape and form that it took. But as I matured as a young man, um, I started the foundation right before I completely retired as a pro boxer, because I knew I was going to need to, connect with some folks that could help my cause. And so I started the foundation in 2001. And so it's really been a real joy for me. Um, geez, I mean, the story is so long with that. We've made quite a few Golden Glove champions, and the list goes on and on. We've had a few ringside world champions, and it's just been a great joy. It's no greater joy than being able to give back in that way. Yeah.
Right. So I was kind of doing my research on YouTube. One of the places I was doing my research, and I seen you got the gym, and not every boxer, transitions to wanting to teach boxing after they're done. And I mean, that can go for any sport. A lot of people don't
Yes.
stay in the sport. They're kind of, they're kind of done with it once they're
Right.
So, what is some advice that you have for boxers that might be in your gym now, or that might be contemplating on boxing or just starting to box? And what's the biggest thing that you can, give them as far as how to get started?
Well, I think it's got to be something that you enjoy. Number one,
Yeah.
The encouragement to them would be to have fun, and if they want to, someday teach, definitely file what you learn from good coaches that you're going to be around outside of me, and file that information, and take it definitely uh, one step at a time, toward that, and really just um, uh, you know as you learn this information, these things develop, your the way that you're going to do it, and not try to be like, let's say, I mean, you want mentors, but you don't want to quite, exactly copycat,
Right.
you know,
Your own.
copycat people. You want to, yeah, be your own thing. And so that would be the thing that I would say for most fighters, like like you were just talking about, like you were saying. Um, for me, I kind of I looked at it, boxing, that it was going to be something that I did actually wanted to do, because most fighters, like you said, most athletes, when they're done with this stuff, they're just done.
Right.
And I understand that, because I've traveled the world at least twice. So I get it.
Mhm.
I definitely get it. I was sitting, and I don't want to really kind of lose out myself in this conversation, but
No, you're
I
fine.
was I was sitting down at one of the tournaments that I took my kids to, and and I had a flashback. And the flashback was like, this tournament is like forever long, man. And if you're gonna stick around this tournament, you're gonna have to keep winning, 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 and be there to the last day, or you go home early. Because they put it like, like basketball, losers go home. So that's the whole idea. So I'm sitting up in the stand and I have this thing done on me, and I really kind of pray to myself and I say, God, grace me. Because if this what you've called me to do, which I really feel that it is, grace me, because there's a lot of traveling to be done. I do travel a little less now because I have coaches.
Right.
So I put them on the trip. I said, don't call me unless the kid makes it to the semifinals, and then I'll come. That's funny to me. So don't call me till because I end up winning like 12 national titles. That was the most ever in amateur that I know.
Right.
So I was like, don't call me. Call me when the kid makes it to the semifinals, and then I'll come. Because I understand the whole deal. But you have to have that. You have to have that love for it. And so just because a fighter was a great fighter doesn't mean that he's going to be a great coach.
Gotcha.
It doesn't mean that he's going to be a great coach because it's all about communication, being able to communicate what you're trying to get across to the kid. And I think, and that's probably what I didn't say earlier, what I'm going to say now, what I would say to one of the kids is be an effective communicator. Because if you can be an effective communicator, that's more likely going to make you a great coach someday.
Right. That's great advice. I have one more question. And like I said, I do appreciate you for taking time and coming on and talk to me. But the last question I got is a pretty simple question, but it could have a very deep answer. What does Mr. Arthur Johnson want to be remembered for? It could be anything. When your boxing is all said and done, what do you want to be remembered for?
Oh my goodness. I think more importantly, how I treated people, the way I was as an individual. I think that's more important than anything, because a lot of folks know me from boxing, but they don't know a lot of other things that I do. And next to boxing, what I did was I'm a singer. I'm an artist. I've been putting out music for a very, very long time. In fact, I have a couple of great songs that's already out. One called "Time Is Changing," and it's got over 500,000 streams, and another song that's coming right behind that. That's called "Simpler Times." But I think more importantly, how I treated people. And so when they think about Arthur Flash Johnson, they go, oh, what a nice guy. I think that's a great way to be remembered, that you treated everybody, fairly. And that even when I dominated the sport, I didn't look down on any guys or any person. That didn't make me any better than the next individual. I just took care of my business. That's basically what it was. But more importantly, that how you're looked at, what people think about. And I think for me, I like when people think of me, I want them to think that, a person of integrity, a person that was, a good person that treated everybody with respect.
Pretty deep answer. I like it though. I like it. I do appreciate you for coming on and talking with me a little bit. You mentioned you've got music out. Where can people find your music?
Well, they can find my music on SoundCloud is where most of the streams have been for my song "Time Is Changing" and the other song "Simpler Time," and it's right under Arthur Flash Johnson. So at first I was using my middle name when I'd done music earlier, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense, I guess, to a lot of people. So it didn't get a lot of streams, but that I've changed my name, and I have a manager by the name of Willie J, who's done a great job managing me in terms of in the music perspective. He knows the ins and outs. He's a great guy to have, as manager. So yeah, but on every major platform right now, you can stream Arthur Flash Johnson song time is changing. It's on every major platform. So it's out there, YouTube, everything. So it's a good, it's a good song. I like it a
Yeah,
lot.
as soon as we get off of here, thank you again for coming on and talking to me, and you have a good rest of your day, man.
Thank you, man. Miles, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. You're gonna go far, kid.
I hope so. Appreciate it. Have a good day, man.
All right, bye-bye.